Welcome to the Athlete with Asthma show. Today, I want to share with you my 5 best mental tricks to run longer. Now, I didn't even like running until about 5 years ago, and I grew up with asthma. When I was 4 years old, I had multiple doctors tell me that I will never be a runner. So if I had aspirations, they told a 4-year-old this. Hey, little 4-year-old Johnny, if you want to run, if you want to be a runner in your life, that's not a good idea. You should not do that. Oh, you like to play soccer? There's a lot of running in soccer. You probably shouldn't do that either. The point is, some people are runners their entire life. They, in high school, join the cross country team. Join track. I ran track for 1 season. By the time I was in high school, I had built up my lung capacity so much that I was able to play soccer without using my inhaler. Well, when I was in high school, I decided that in the non-soccer season, which was the spring, I would run track. And one of my track coaches said, hey, you would be really good at running the 400-meter race. I'm like, okay. That doesn't sound too bad. 400 meters, that is a fourth of a mile. Let's do it. It's one lap around the track. And those training sessions were so brutal. I hated it. I was technically on the team the entire year, but I kind of just stopped showing up to practices. I did not like running. I hated the whole experience. Other people ran cross country in the fall during soccer season. I would never do that. And they ran track in the spring. Some of my fellow students even were talking about running half marathons and marathons. I thought it was all stupid. I'm like, no, why would you run unless you're playing a sport like soccer? Like, why would you do it? Well, around the same time, I was getting into biking. So I started to understand the concept of doing these long distance rides. And I was like, okay, well, a long distance ride, I guess I can kind of conceptualize running. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I got into running. And it wasn't until about 3 to 4 years ago that I really started taking it seriously. Now, I share all that because when you are told at 4 years old that you should not be a runner, it is the last thing you should do with your life, that has impact. And the reality is, I don't know about you, but when I'm told something that I shouldn't do, and I'm very passionate about it, I'm going to do it anyway. I was not passionate about running at the time. But since running has become such an important part of my life, the seed was planted and it started growing. And to this day, I tell myself, my 4-year-old self, it's on. I love it when people tell me that I can't do something and when I'm passionate about it. I'm going to figure out how to do it. The mental tricks I'm going to share with you today, I have used and continue to use from going from kid with asthma, adult with asthma who would never even thought about being a runner to being an ultra marathon runner and a serious ultra marathon runner at that. I won my first 100K race this past year, and it was the most amazing experience ever. So when I first got into running a few years ago, I had never ran more than 5 or 6 miles. Anything longer than 5 or 6 miles looked like, oh my God, that is way too long. So, what's the problem with that mindset? The problem is our brains are wired to hold us back. Why? We are built to keep enough energy within our body so that we can outrun harm. Think of the cavemen. Think of early humanoids. What did we have to do? We had to outrun predators for survival. If a saber-toothed tiger started chasing us, we would either have to fight it or outrun it. So our brains are literally wired to this day, even though most of us don't have saber-toothed tigers running after us, our brains are still wired to always keep enough energy in the tank so that we can outrun that saber-toothed tiger. So if you are not used to, just like I was not used to, ever running more than 5 or 6 miles, your brain is going to make it hard for you to run more than 5 or 6 miles. So the first mental trick I have for you is to just run. Instead of thinking about, I have to run 7 miles today. If you've never ran 7 miles before, heck, if you've never ran a mile before and you're trying to run for the first time, just go out there and run. You could even tell your brain, I'm only going to run a quarter mile. Great. I do this to this day. Even though I have ran 62.5 miles in one day in 12 hours, I still have days where I have zero desire to run, where I'm tired. My brain's like, I really don't want to run today. Well, those days, especially days where I'm like, oh God, I got to run 30 miles today, or I got to run 10 miles today, and I don't even feel like getting off the couch. How I start is I just run. And I tell my brain, I'm only going to run a mile or two. Because I know that once I warm up, once the endorphins start firing in the brain, my brain is going to stop telling me to, hey, yeah, you shouldn't run today, to, oh, what's another mile? Let's do another mile. Now, it's different today versus before I had ran these longer distances, because before it was more about the uncertainty, the mind uncertainty of, oh, God, are we going to have enough energy in the tank to outrun the saber-toothed tiger if we run 7 miles today? So you're training your body. You're literally rewiring your body. And the best way to do it is to just run. Just start. Tell yourself, I'm going to run a quarter mile. Whatever sounds easy to you, commit to that in your brain. Start running, and then when you're 2 miles in, add the extra mile. During my 100K run, I had never ran 100K before. I had run 50, and it was miserable, and my brain remembered that. There was no outrunning a saber-toothed tiger after my 50-mile race. Now, I bet you my body could have figured it out, could have pumped my muscles up with adrenaline, and I could have done it. But I wasn't just limping after my 50-mile race in 2023. I was crawling around. Well, when I did my 100K race, instead of thinking about it on a mile-to-mile basis, I thought about it from a lap-to-lap basis. The 100K was 5 laps around this 20K park, or 12.5-mile park. My 50-mile race was 4 laps around this 12.5-mile park. So in my head, I told myself, all I have to do today is run 5 laps. I've never ran 100K before. I just have to do 5 laps. So I told my brain, you just have to do 1 lap at a time. So what did I do? I just went and ran. And instead of counting miles, I counted laps. So you have to play these mind games with yourself. Just go out there and run. Tell your brain whatever you need to get yourself out there. Once you get started, you can add the mileage. And that brings me to the second mental trick: breaking down your runs. So when you first get started and you're starting out with, maybe you've never ran before and you want to run your first mile, how do you break it up? You break it up into multiple parts. 4 quarter miles. Quarter mile. It's not too much. Now, once you get to running your first 5K, you can break that down into a mile at a time. A 5K is a little over 3 miles. So you knock out 1 mile at a time. When you get to a 10K, same thing. Knock out a mile at a time. Break it up. When you get to your half marathon, you can break it up into 3-mile or 4-mile segments. When you run your half marathon race, they are literally going to break it up and have aid stations along the way. They may even do that in a 5K and a 10K. There's a reason why when you sign up for a race, the race has aid stations. The 100K race I did wasn't only a lap course, so there was a start-finish line where we refueled after every lap. There were 2 aid stations along the way. It was about 5.7 miles, then the first aid station, then another 3.7 miles in the second aid station, then another 3.7 miles we get back to the start-finish line. There's a reason why races break it up like that, because not only Does it make it easier to mentally conceptualize, okay, I just need to get to the next aid station and then I can eat something, I can refuel? It's also very good for you to refuel throughout the race. So break up your runs. Now, as you take running more and more seriously, you're not only going to need to break up your runs, you're going to need to break up the amount of mileage that you are going to run in a week. The first couple marathons I trained for, I worried less about how much mileage I was getting done in a week and much more about how much mileage I was getting done in my one big day of training every week. Well, I'll tell you this, when you first get started, it is important to focus on the long run because the long run is the most important run of the week. If you are going to only do one of the runs that week, you need to do the long run. I highly recommend that you do other runs throughout the week as well. But if there's one run you're going to do in a week, you need to do the long run. But as you get more and more into it, and as you increase the mileage that you're training for, to run a 50-mile race, your peak week most likely needs to be at least 50, but more likely 70 miles plus. If you are planning on running a 100K race, same thing. Your peak week better be 70, 80, 90, or 100 miles. How you break up that 100 miles, that 50 miles, that 30 miles is up to you in that week. I've had friends train for marathons where they didn't have time to do a long run on Saturday or Sunday. They didn't have time to run 20 miles, but they did have time to still run 30 or 35 miles in a week, and they still completed their marathon in less than 5 hours. So if you are struggling to mentally wrap your head around doing your long runs, let's say you've never ran 10 miles before. It seems like this big, massive thing until you do it. But if you break up that 10-mile run to, I'm just going to run 2 miles at a time, it starts mentally becoming a lot easier. And if you're training for a marathon and you are like my friend Ben, who didn't have time to run 20 miles in one day because he's a dentist, he works 6 days a week. And the last thing he wanted to do was run 20 miles on his off day. So what did he do? He ran 35 miles in a week and he just spread it out across the week. You can do that too. It might be a lot easier for you to conceptualize running 6 miles a day for 6 days in a week instead of running that 20-mile long run on the weekend. And this is how we train for these long runs. If you're running a 50-mile run for the first time, the longest run you're going to do during that training cycle is about 30 miles. Same thing with 100K. The longest run you're going to do on a training cycle is about 30 miles. My peak week for my 100K, I did 100 miles in the week. And what did that mean? Well, I didn't have as much time earlier in the week. So what I did is on Friday, I ran 22 miles. On Saturday, I ran 31. And then on Sunday, I ran 22. Now, I'm about 4 years into my serious running journey, my ultra running journey. So it took me 4 years to get to the point where I could mentally conceptualize running 75 miles in 3 days, 22, 31, 22, and 100 miles in a week. But it took time. It took retraining my brain to realize that, hey, I can do this run and still outrun the saber-toothed tiger. So make sure to go out there and just run and then break down your runs into segments. Best mental trick number 3. The power of multitasking. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of responsibilities in my life, and there's also a lot of things I want to do in my life. So multitasking, not only from a running perspective, but from a life perspective, really helps aid my life. So how the heck am I going to get 100 miles in for my peak week of training for running a 100K run? How the heck are you going to get your 30 to 40 miles in for your peak week running a marathon? How the heck are you going to get the miles in you need to run your 5K, your 10K? I don't care how much you love running. At some point, you are going to need to multitask in one degree or another. For me, I don't really have time to read. I also don't have time to watch videos. I don't have time to take courses. But what I do have time for is to listen to them while running. in order to become a better business owner, a better yoga instructor, and just a better person overall. Maybe you're listening to this right now. Maybe you're watching the YouTube video and you just got the idea, oh, I could listen to this while running. That's a great idea. I invite you to do that. If you are watching this on YouTube, I highly recommend that you not only subscribe to the YouTube channel, but follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform and go out and run. This is how I consume most of my media, is by listening to it while running. It not only allows me to multitask and learn, it also takes my mind off of running. A 2-hour run mentally becomes a lot less of me focusing on how long I'm out there. It's a lot less of me focusing on, oh, how many miles have I ran? And a lot more of me focusing on what I'm learning in the audiobook or the podcast that I'm listening to. It takes your mind off of what you're doing. You start getting in a flow state. Your brain starts focusing on what you're learning instead of the pain you're feeling. There's actual research that shows that listening to something while you run is a painkiller. There's a reason why David Goggins refuses to listen to music while he runs. He looks at it as cheating. And hey, if you are a purist like that, I understand. Go and do that. Don't opt in for the music. For my 100K run, I did the first 2 laps or 25 miles without anything. And it's because I knew that I could mentally do the first 25 miles without any help. Then, once I started the 3rd lap, I started listening to a podcast. I had my podcast set up. I had different books set up, including Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I had these things lined up. And I started listening to the podcast, and it helped take my mind off of things. So the other thing that helps take your mind off of things, and that will actually create a physiological response in your body, is listening to music. Listening to music is another form of multitasking while running, and it is a mental trick that you can use. When you listen to music, it not only acts as a painkiller, it not only helps take your mind off of what you're doing in the moment, listening to music may even release different chemicals in your brain. On lap 3 of my 100K this past year, it was really hot. We started the race at 5:30 a.m. in the dark. I had my headlamp. I felt really good. I trained all summer wearing long sleeves, wearing a hoodie. And even though I was ready for the midday heat that I was eventually going to hit, I celebrated the fact that I would be able to do the first lap in the dark without the sun. And the second lap would still be relatively cooler outside because the sun wouldn't be out for very long. Well, my first 12.5 miles took me about 2 hours and 5 minutes. My second 12.5 miles took me 2 hours and 10 minutes. My third 12.5 miles is when the sun really started beating down. And yes, I multitasked by listening to a podcast and one of my running books, specifically Rise of the Ultra Runner. I even started listening to Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Well, the problem is, even though this was helping a little bit, it was getting really hot. So what did I do? I turned on music. I turned it on earlier than I wanted to. I turned it on around mile 28. I was trying to wait until I got into the 30s or 40s, or like I said, I wasn't thinking about miles. I was thinking about laps. So I was really trying to wait until lap 4. My goal was to get through lap 3 by listening to a podcast. The problem is, as I was leaving the start-finish station going into lap 3, one of the volunteers of the event thought it would be funny to say, hey, you're starting the hardest lap. This is the hardest lap. They knew I was running the 100K. They knew that I had 5 laps to do, and they knew that the 3rd lap would be the hardest because this is the getting over the hump lap. This is the getting past the middle point lap. So they said this, and I knew the second they said this that I would have to try and push this thought as far away from my brain as possible. Otherwise, it was going to start mentally messing with me. I really did not appreciate them saying this. I know they were trying to be funny, and really how they said it is they're like, hey, all you have to do is get through this lap and you're good. This is the hardest lap. And I'm like, yes, this is what I've been preparing for months is that this is going to be the hardest lap. So what did I do? Mile 28, about 3 miles into my third lap, I turned music on. I had trained to it. I had not only trained running to music, I had trained doing other workouts to music, doing something called Yoga Sculpt, which I also teach. Yoga Sculpt for me is a very mental and emotional exercise because it's done to music. So I have specific songs that I know turn something on mentally in my mind that say, it's on, I'm ready, let's go. So I knew that these volunteers had planted this mental block in my head, and I knew, hey, I'm going to do this earlier than I wanted to, and I know David Goggins wouldn't approve, but I'm going to do it. I know my body. I know I mentally need it. So I turned on the songs. Specifically, I went to Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes, one of the variations of the song. There's been a lot of remixes over the years. There's a specific remix that I love right now. Once I turned it on, it shut my mind down. I no longer was thinking this is the hardest lap. I started thinking, let's go. I'm ready. Bring it on. And I made it through. So you can use music as a multitasking tool. You can use this podcast as a multitasking tool. What I like to do is listen to inspirational podcasts that push me to be my best. So I invite you to take this podcast with you on your runs or any workouts that you have. Another way to multitask is, let's say you are a busy parent and you have a treadmill at home. Why not turn that treadmill on and watch Netflix? Turn that treadmill on and work out at home. Maybe you need to be home so that you are available if your kids need you. This is a form of multitasking. You can get that run in and watch Netflix and be home for your kids. It's a way to do it. I personally don't like running on treadmills, but if it was the only option, if it was the way that I knew I could mentally get running, I would do it. And I recommend that for you as well. Maybe in the wintertime you want to run, but you don't like running in the snow like I do. I actually love running in the snow, and I invite you to carefully go outside, run in the snow on trails when it freshly snows. My favorite time to run, hands down, no comparisons, not even close, throughout the year is when it has freshly snowed. In my opinion, there's nothing better than running on fresh snow. I don't care how cold it is. The cold doesn't mean anything to me. When there's fresh snow on trails, first of all, there's no one out there. Second of all, it's beautiful. And third of all, there is no better feeling on your feet as a runner than running through the pillowy snow during the winter. And the fourth bonus thing is that our dog doesn't overheat when we run in the winter. Unlike humans, dogs don't sweat. Humans sweat. That's how we release our heat. We release it through our mouth and our nose as well, but we release it through our skin. We sweat. Dogs only release it through their mouth. This is why we are known as the running people. Humans are known as the running people. We actually evolved into humans because we learned how to run down our prey without using weapons. We could literally run our prey to death. If you don't believe me, read the book Born to Run. There's a lot of research out there supporting this, that before we had weapons, we actually ran down our food. So if you are not ready to go outside and run during the winter, then yes, you can run on a treadmill and get some other things done. You can watch Netflix. You can be available for your families and get that multitasking in all in one. And it will help you mentally by multitasking. And if you eventually want to be as hardcore as David Goggins, I get it. You can work up to that point. 2 years ago, I could not run a marathon without music. Just this past year, I not only finished my 100K run, I PR'd on my marathon on my way to finishing 62 and a half miles, and I didn't listen to anything. So you can build your way up or jump into the deep end like David Goggins if you can mentally get there. If you can't, use the multitasking. It will help you get there. The fourth best mental trick that I use to run longer is the run walk. Now, you can use the run walk for so many different things. I teach people how to run walk to build up your lungs, your lung capacity as an athlete with asthma. I use this throughout my entire life. Think about it. When I played soccer, you're not running the entire soccer game. Sometimes you're sprinting, sometimes you're jogging, sometimes you're walking. Well, in soccer, how I trained myself to no longer need my inhaler is, first of all, I stopped taking it at the beginning of the game. I would wait for my lungs to actually need it. And 10, 15 minutes into the first practice that I did this, I needed my inhaler. Great, took it. Next day, it took me 17 minutes until I needed it. Next day, it took me 20 minutes until I needed it. Eventually, I got to the point where I realized that instead of using my inhaler, I could calm things down. I could sprint and then catch my breath while walking. Do my extended exhales. Do my audible exhales. That's what I learned how to do. Same thing with running and your mentality, your mental shift, how to mentally trick yourself to go farther. Once your brain has done a certain mileage, it doesn't matter if you've ran it or walked it, your brain remembers doing that mileage. So let's say that you're struggling to get to that next level. Maybe you were like me and you had never ran 10 miles before and you did your first 10-mile training run and it was debilitating thinking about it. You've never ran double-digit miles before. Well, you know what I did for the first 10-mile run I ever did? I walked half of it. Now, there's a reason why I walked half of it. It wasn't just a mental thing. It was a physical thing. I not only mentally couldn't wrap my head around running 10 miles, my right knee was bothering me 5 miles in. So I got to Mount Carbon, this hill/mountain that I train on frequently. And I felt pretty good going into it. I'm like, oh, I got this. I can run 10 miles. I got to mile 5. I had ran 8 miles before at this point, right? I progressively overloaded. I talk about this in a lot of episodes and videos on this channel. Progressive overload, getting to 10 miles. I had done 8, had never done 10. I felt great at 5. I'm like, I'm at this hill. We're going to get after it. Like clockwork, I hit 5 miles. Going up the hill. My knee starts hurting. So what does my brain say? My brain says, you've never ran 10 miles before. This was a stupid idea. What are you doing? Your knee's hurting. How the heck are we going to outrun the saber-toothed tiger? And yeah, I really started questioning it. I'm like, oh, my knee hurts. I could just give up right now. I'm not that far from a pickup location. Someone can pick me up. But then I also told myself, what if I just walk it? If you're a 5K runner or a 10K runner, and maybe you've done it a few times, you're probably like, well, why the heck would I walk? Maybe you've never done a 5K before. You know you can walk a 5K, and that counts. People do it. You know you can walk a 10K. You can walk a half marathon. Heck, you can walk a marathon. If you want a marathon to walk and you can afford to go to Hawaii, go run the Hawaii Marathon. There was no cutoff time for the Hawaii Marathon. One of the biggest marathons in the world, and it doesn't have a cutoff time. You can take as long as you want. They leave the finish line open for the last runner to finish. As long as you stay in the race, you will finish. You can walk these things. I learned this as I became an ultra runner. The best ultra runners in the world walk. It's just how it goes. At some point, if you're doing a 100-mile run and there's 40 or 50,000 feet of vertical, you're going to be walking at some point. Now, you may be power walking, power hiking, walking really fast, but you are going to walk. Walking counts. So 5 miles in, my knee's hurting. My brain's saying, how the heck are we going to outrun the saber-toothed tiger? You should give up. Why are you even trying? At 4 years old, you were told that you should never be a runner. For some reason, you did it anyway. You don't even like this. In high school, you didn't like this. You stopped running track in high school. You never ran cross country in high school. What the heck are you doing? And I said, shut up. I'm going to walk. Because I know that by doing this, for the first time, I ran half of it. I'm going to walk the other half. I'm going to teach my brain that I can do this. So I walked. And I walked. And I walked. And I told myself, okay, how long can I walk a mile? How long is it going to take? 15 minutes? 20 minutes? I have 5 miles left. So 5 miles times 20 minutes, let's say I walk a 20-minute pace, I'm going to be out here for an hour and 40 minutes. That pissed me off too. Because my brain started thinking, okay, well, he's committed. He's going to walk now. He's going to walk the rest of this run for some reason. He's walking. I mean, I've told him that the saber-toothed tiger is going to get him and then his knee hurts if he doesn't stop right now, but he's still walking. Why are you doing this? And then it was like, oh God, he's committed. We're going to be out here for another hour and 40 minutes. Well, guess what? Once my brain conceptualized that, it was like, well, how could we get this done faster? We could run. Oh, maybe my knee doesn't hurt. And then I ran the last mile. It's crazy how our brains work. That's why we're going through best mental tricks today. And that's why I'm talking you through the exact conversations I have with my brain. Walk running counts. Guess what? I finished that 10-mile walk run. Guess what? The next week I had to run 12 miles. I never ran 12 miles before. And I did it because I had finished the walk run of 10. And I told myself going into the next run, you're going to be able to do 12 even if you walk it. You gotta rewire the brain and tell it walking counts. And you can do this going into your run. You don't have to get to a point where your brain's yelling at you. You could literally say, you know what? I'm going to do interval training here. I'm going to run a mile, walk a mile, run a mile, walk a mile. And that's how I'm going to get it done. The first 50-mile race that I did, I walked probably a quarter of it. The 100K I just did, maybe I walked 1 or 2 miles. Progressive overload. I progressively got to this point. And so can you. Walking is your friend. And if you are an athlete with asthma out there and you're hearing everything that I'm saying and you're like, wow, I can never even conceptualize running, but I can walk and walk my way up to running. Yes. That's how I did it. That's how I played soccer without my inhaler. That's how I worked my lungs. You can do it too. Just make sure you check with your healthcare professional. I have a disclaimer in the show notes and in the description. Always check with your healthcare professional. Asthma is a serious thing. Always make sure you have your handy dandy inhaler with you and strengthen your lungs. You can do that with a walk run. And speaking of asthma, my 5th mental trick, and this is probably my favorite one, is focusing on your breath. And you've probably heard this before. But when I say focus on your breath, I don't mean just think about it. I mean make noise. When you're running, make noise. Literally try and make your breath as loud as possible. Along with this being a mental trick, because once you get into a pattern, once you get into a sequence where you're focusing on your exhales and you're breathing like this, your mind will zone into the run. Your mind will stop focusing on what mile you're on. Your mind will stop saying, hey, saber-toothed tiger, saber-toothed tiger, saber-toothed tiger, what are you doing? And it will center yourself on your breath. Another thing happens here. You will literally be bringing more oxygen into your body. You will literally be making your body more efficient at energy output. Research shows that when you push out air, when you focus on audible exhales, when you do a single or even better, a double audible exhale, you push out more CO2, making space in your lungs to take in more oxygen. And when you take in more oxygen, your body is more efficient with energy. You not only help yourself as a runner, this is physiology, this is science. Your body is becoming more efficient. You will also strengthen your lungs. As an athlete with asthma, you will be empowering your lungs to be stronger, to be more efficient. When runs get hard and my brain is fighting me and it's saying, what are you doing? I always come back to my breath. The 5th and final lap of my 100K race, I had 20K left, 12 and a half miles left. I was tired. My brain had not yet told my body it's okay to run. It's okay to let loose. For me, at some point in every run, my brain gets to the point where it's like, okay, there's just enough left. I believe you, we can do it. And then it's on. When I first got into running, it was maybe the last half mile. Now, I don't know when it's going to turn on. I don't know if it's going to turn on at 10 miles left. I don't know if it's going to turn on 7, on 5, on 3. I don't know when it's going to turn on. I'll tell you this, my brain did not tell my body it's okay to empty the tank when there was 12 and a half miles left. I had 50 miles down. I had done 50 before. I wasn't even thinking about that. I just knew that I had one lap left and I had to keep moving. I had to forward is a pace. Forward is a pace. But I was not ready to empty the tank. So what did I do? I came back to my breath. I always fall back on my breath. In anything, in any workout, in anything in life, I fall back to my breath. And I just make these really obnoxious, loud exhales. Well, that's what I did the beginning of this final lap. I had my music on. I was using music as my mental trick. Now, I had been listening to these songs for a while because I needed it earlier in the race than I wanted to use it. But I came back to my breath. I had not used breaths fully as a mental trick yet. So I started looping my favorite song to not only pump me up and give me energy, but to breathe to. 7 Nation Army, the Glitch Mob remix. Okay. So I got this going and I used this to inform my breath. So my brain was focusing on the song and focusing on my breath being on the beat of the song. So I not only was able to manage my asthma, because I had never ran 50 miles before. I didn't know how my lungs were going to react. I also zoned in, fell back on my breath, and made it to the point where my brain finally decided we're gonna finish this. And it actually happened later than I thought. When I did my 50-mile race, it happened 7 miles from the finish. 7 miles from the finish. I got all this energy and I sprinted the last 7 miles. Now, a little different comparison. I had been walking a lot more in that race. I also had been walking for about 3 or 4 miles when the switch flipped in my brain, telling myself that I could run. In my 100K, I had been running almost the entire time. And I was running a faster pace than I ever had before this far into a race. At the time, I was in second place male. First place male, I'd been chasing him all day. He passed me about 2 hours into the race, and I've been chasing him for the last 9 hours. So I was also in third place overall at this point. So I was worried about someone coming and passing me and knocking me out of my place. So a lot of mental things going on here. So I fell back to music and my breath and my training. I even replayed the script of when I was 4 years old being told I would never be a runner. I replayed the script that I was told 3 months prior that I should not run in September because I was just diagnosed with a hole in my heart. Cardiologist told me this. Now, it was an initial opinion from a cardiologist, not a cardiologist who had actually sat down and looked at all the details, and then they ultimately gave me the okay to do what I did. But the initial cardiologist told me, you are not going to be running in September. So I was playing all these things because I'm like, you know what? I am running right now and I have the opportunity to place. I don't just have the opportunity to place, I could even win this thing. So I was pushing hard. The switch in my brain had not flipped yet to tell me that it was on, though. It didn't happen until about 3 miles out. It didn't truly happen until a mile and a half out. I was nervous. There was a lot at stake. I didn't want to mess it up. A mile and a half out, I knew I had it. And that's when I ran a sub 7-minute mile for the last mile and a half, and I won the race. But you don't know when that's going to turn on. So you got to fall back on all these mental tricks. You got to use them throughout. You got to combine them like I combined breath and music. You got to combine them like I combined walk running. There was a point in the race where my hamstring seized up. I was about 37 miles in. My hamstring seized up and I couldn't run. So what did I do? I didn't stop. I walked. I told myself, I'm going to keep moving. As long as I keep moving, I have a chance to place. I have a chance to win this thing. I got to keep moving. So I gave myself every opportunity as I possibly could. I didn't get down on myself. I'm like, I'm going to walk. So what I did, I ran in that race. I broke down that race. Instead of thinking about it of 62.2 miles or 100K, I thought about it one lap at a time. I counted laps, not miles. and I just ran. Now, I appreciate you being here. We've talked about a lot today, and that's why I want to give you a gift. I have created this guide, step-by-step guide, the 3 pillars of healthy living that I live by to this day. Believe it or not, asthma has had an effect on my weight throughout my life. I have found it hard to keep weight off because my asthma has limited me in some ways. In addition, believe it or not, in 2022, when I ran the Honolulu Marathon, when I first became an ultra runner, I put on weight. And this happens to people where you start working out and you actually put on weight instead of losing it. Well, I put on weight because I thought I could eat anything I wanted. Now, I was eating healthy. My girlfriend and my mom were doing most of the cooking, and then I would cook too, and we had healthy stuff around the house. But I still put 40 pounds on when I first became a runner. And it's because I thought I could eat as much as I wanted, because that's what I was told. You're a runner, you're working out, you can eat as much as you want. Well, that wasn't the case. Even though I was using the first pillar of healthy living, which is movement, which I highly recommend all of you do, research shows that movement alone, exercise alone, consistent exercise alone decreases all-cause mortality rates by 35%. This is better than any drug that you can buy. In the book Outlive by MD Peter Attia, he digs even deeper into this and all sorts of other things you can do for your longevity and your health. But movement is the one silver bullet if you're going to do one thing. Well, even if you do that one thing, you can still gain weight. And that's why I've put this guide together where I go through my other 2 pillars of healthy living. Tracking and accountability. When you combine movement, tracking, and accountability, you are able to not only drop weight, but sustainably keep it off and live a healthier life. Even if you are okay with your current weight, by combining these 3 pillars, you're going to start living an even healthier life. So put this guide together. It's easy for you to integrate into your life immediately. It's going to take you less than 3 minutes to even read it. You can skim it. It's going to be really easy. I gave you the 3 pillars just now. It's just going to outline it more in detail. I'll give you some strategies of how to integrate them into your life so you can do it today. You can grab that guide in the show notes. You can grab it in the description, or you can go to www.athletewithasthma.com/healthy-living-guide to grab your free guide. And I'll see you in the next episode.